What do you remember from 7th grade? Perhaps your first thoughts are of a middle school dance, that awkward unpleasantness of navigating relationships with love interests who seem to change on a near daily basis, figuring out the new load of homework, striving for some independence, a time when childhood has begun to end, but adulthood has not really yet begun. Middle school has become something of a cliche, but do you also remember, without Googling it, mind you, the movies of your middle school years? I do. Ghostbusters, 16 Candles, Karate Kid and Footloose and Terminator. And I remember that my 7th grade year was when the Olympics came to Los Angeles and the first Macintosh computer came out. It was a time of fears for sure, as we were taught to hide underneath our desks in case of a nuclear blast from the Soviet Union, singing along desperately with Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtles. In Europe and America, there's a growing feeling of hysteria. I still remember all of the words. But it was also a time of innocence, of faith that somehow we would be able to make it all right, that life would be good and meaningful and important. Not so for one 7th grade boy. And I'd like to tell you his story. There is a book called Nothing, and it is a story of a boy who witnesses in the 7th grade something that we hope none of our children have to witness at all while they are children, and that is a death. He's there present for a death of someone close to him. And he struggles and he wrestles, and he decides that after all, life means nothing. If all that happens is that at some point we die, then for him, life means nothing. And so he climbs up into a tree, and he resolves never to come down from that tree. His friends are devastated. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to address him and his fears. And they begin to wrestle with their own understanding of the universe. And at first, they begin to create a pile beneath the tree, a pile of meaning. All of the things that are important to them, things that really matter in their lives, their sports jerseys, a canvas, a letter from somebody important, a picture. And they begin to wrestle with these things for themselves to figure out, what does it all mean? What is the point? And still he won't come down. And they wrestle and they wrestle, and they try and they try. And never once do they consult each other. And never once do they consult teachers or parents or anyone who has a legacy of wisdom that they might be able to turn to. And so, in fact, they all begin to feel that life means nothing in the 7th grade. But really, this is all of our story. All of us are searching for meaning. That's one of the things that brings us into this room on this day. We are searching for the point. This year, a woman came to see me in my office, struggling with her life, with faith, with who she has been in her 80-something years. She wanted me to know who she was on a spiritual level so that when that day comes, I can speak about who she really is. But she was afraid to come to me because she was afraid that she didn't believe. We wrestled and we wrestled with faith. And I've seen so many people in my office over this year. I look out at this congregation and I see people who are searching for meaning and purpose, people who are wrestling with despair and depression. People saying to themselves, life wasn't supposed to be this way. People dealing with financial strife when we did everything right, every step along the way, and still that strife comes. People wrestling with alcoholism. I look out And I see the stories that are held in this room. The stories of fear about school. The stories of anguish and fear and pain and loneliness. The feeling and the fear that we are not enough. Two kinds of people have come into my office this year searching. There are those who have failed or feel that they have failed, and they are desperate to understand why. And then there are those who have succeeded and find that the things they thought were real and meaningful, those piles of meaning, actually are not. And I want to tell you what I have encouraged all those who have come through my office to discover. There is meaning. There is purpose to life. And there is meaning and purpose to you. How do I know this? How do I know this at my core? I know this because I have faith. I know this because I believe in God. I am not alone in this belief, and I am not alone in my own fears about speaking about faith in a synagogue in the 21st century. Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote, "I am a rabbi. For 22 years I was a chief rabbi, but in the end, I think it was we, the rabbis, who did not do enough to help people open their doors, their minds, and their feelings to the presence beyond the universe who created us in love that our ancestors knew so well and loved so much. We were afraid of the intellectual challenges of an increasingly secular culture, of the social challenges of being in, yet not entirely of, the world, of the emotional challenge of finding Jews and Judaism or the state of Israel criticized or condemned. So we retreated behind a high wall, thinking that made us safe. High walls never make you safe. They only make you fearful. The only thing that makes you safe is confronting the challenges without fear and inspiring others to do likewise. First thing I want to tell you is that no sermon on God is going to completely change your mind about what God is or isn't. And that is as it should be. The subject matter is far too complex for an easy answer. But my challenge to you is to wrestle. I want you to come in and talk with me. I want you to ask questions and passionately challenge. Whether you are a student in our B'nai Mitzvah class, a teen, a parent, a grandparent, or a fourth grader, tell me this. When did Judaism cease to become the religion of demanding questions? Aren't we the people whose Passover Seder has questioning at its core? Aren't we the people whose Talmud and commentaries record not one opinion, but the opinions of rabbis arguing across the centuries? We are Yisrael, the people who wrestles with God. So in many ways, those of you who doubt are fulfilling the promise of our people in a way only you can. You wrestle. But we are not the people who once did wrestle with God and now have decided that God does not exist. Do you remember the story of Jacob? Jacob in the Torah is my favorite character, and his story is my favorite story. He's running for his life. He has just done something quite terrible to his brother. And in a moment, the sun sets, causing him to have to stop for the night in a special place. And so he stops, and he dreams. And he dreams of a ladder. And on that ladder, the angels are going up and down. And when he wakes up, he says, Ma nora hamakom hazeh. God is in this place, and I did not know it. Sometimes we need just the right place, just the right torment in life, just the right loneliness to discover what was there all along. In the next piece of his story, an angel confronts him, and they wrestle all the night long. And as the dawn approaches, Jacob tells the angel, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Chutzpahdik. The angel tells him, fine, your name shall be Yisrael, because you have struggled with God and man and you have prevailed. And from that moment on, Jacob Yisrael walks with a limp, a sign that the struggle has forever changed him. That is our story. Individuals who struggle with what is divine and are forever changed. We could look everywhere in the Jewish text to see the presence of God, and those stories move me. They are as real to me, metaphor as they may be, as the story of the moment when I met my husband, and I knew in that very moment that this was the man I was going to marry. They are as real to me as the story of my parents' courtship, the story of my great-grandparents coming to Ellis Island. They are a part of the fabric of our own story. I believe, and you can too. It is okay in this postmodern world full of skepticism, full of cynicism, in which we're taught to challenge everything, to say that you actually know that God exists. What you feel, what you know, is real. It is as real as something else we cannot touch or see or smell or taste. It is as real as love. Being a part of a shared community who are not afraid to speak about their faith in God, their shared goals and visions for the world, this can strengthen each other. How do you tell your own story? If you were to meet somebody new, somebody you really want to get to know you on a deeper level, how do you tell the narrative of your life? Do you talk of your experiences as a child, the things that harmed or motivated you? Do you talk about love gained and lost, career or kids or parents? We, the Jewish people, begin our story with God. Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning, when God began to create, and so on and so forth. We could have started anywhere. We could have started with Abraham, the first Jew, or Noah. Everything that really comes to be comes after the flood, or Adam, the first human being. We could have started with Moses. But instead, we anchor our story in the core of who we are, that God does exist, and that we flawed people are made more holy through the centuries by engaging in and trying to listen to this God. So how do we hear God? Who, in fact, is this God? People come into my office and tell me, Rabbi, I don't believe in God. And I answer with words that I learned from a teacher of mine. Well, which God is it that you don't believe in? Do you not believe in a little man in the sky who makes earthquakes happen? Me neither. We are not a people who submit to God, who let God dictate events of life and walk away resigned and defeated. Abraham, in our story for Rosh Hashanah, learns this painfully, and he makes the biggest mistake of his life by not arguing with God. If we are literalists, then we are bound to have difficulty with the idea of God in Jewish texts and prayers, as Maimonides expressed, like Rabbi Aronson spoke about yesterday. We are supposed to see the wealth of our traditional poetry as just that, poetry, metaphor. The beauty of Judaism is that there are about as many versions of God as there are Jews. So again, a challenge. Pick up Choices in Modern Jewish Thought, written by Dr. Eugene Borowitz, and learn about the complexities brilliant minds have written about, and see where you fit in. Come talk to me. Come wrestle with these ideas with any one of your rabbis. Argue with God. For those of you not moved by our heritage of narrative and metaphor and story, I have some evidence for you. Not evidence that God exists. That's not possible, just as there is no evidence that God doesn't exist. But evidence that it is better for the individual and for our society if we act as if God exists. Number one, the human being is better with God. Yes, I know that atrocities have been committed in the name of God. But friends, even greater atrocities have been committed not in the name of God. The human brain is better with God. There is a whole new field of neurotheology. God makes us more honest because we are accountable, more generous because we learn that it isn't all about us, more fulfilled because we can relinquish control over all of life and believe in just the choices that we make rather than in the need to influence the entire world, more compassionate because instead of pitying someone, looking down upon them from our lofty view, we are in this together, side by side, in the name of God. This can make us more disciplined and self-controlled. The words of Viktor Frankl ring in my head: between stimulus and response is the last human freedom. The human being is better with God because God is the antidote to narcissism. Narcissism is not only bad for the people around him or her, but for the narcissist himself. It is no accident that the narcissism epidemic has grown while we're living in a postmodern, cynical, skeptical world. In this world, we face a cultural trend in which there is no objective truth, just a series of personal, emotional truths. There seems to be no real purpose in a world like that except personal happiness and self-expression. And it is a giant fallacy, because this kind of rash grab at self-expression does not actually make a person happier. It is this kind of turning away from God and toward personal needs that creates the thing the entire Torah fights against: idolatry. Idolatry is not just a literal sin, it is a metaphoric one. We are not talking about bowing down to a golden calf. We are talking about placing money, cars, exercise. I just got my spinning certification this year. Beauty, health, soccer, baseball, I might be guilty of this one too, before the source of all goodness, the unifying truth of the universe. When we turn away from God, we turn toward something. We turn toward idols. We begin to idolize ourselves, humanity, progress, our children, our careers, our piles of meaning. But faith in God helps us to see ourselves as part of a web of humanity and existence. It helps us to connect truly to one another and to recover from the stress and anxiety of the challenges we face daily, to find happiness that is lasting and true, built on knowing that we are living with a grand purpose. Not only do we individuals need God, but society needs God. God is the source of our morality. Our Torah portion today, we just read, Atem nitzavim, you stand here with a choice between good and evil, between life and death. And then the text tells us, choose life. The rabbis ask, why? Why would the text have to say choose life? Isn't it obvious? It isn't obvious unless there is a central truth. It isn't obvious unless there is something to which we can trace that morality. Even the 10 Commandments, they are introduced, Vayedaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor, ani Adonai Elohechem. God sets forth these things. God gives us the 10 Commandments. They do not arise from nowhere, from our own personal truths. There is ultimately a right and a wrong. There is ultimately a good and an evil in the world. There are also personal truths that are emotional, that animate all of us, and those are good, but they are not the good. They are not the truth. Our community needs God. One nation under God, indivisible. One nation under God is indivisible. One nation not under God is divisible. This is the only way that it works, no matter how much we want it to work some other way. No matter how much we want to be inclusive of everyone's beliefs, one nation not under God is divided. That goes for the nation of the Jews, and that goes for America. Now, we do not need to believe in a specific God. We do not refer to Allah or Yahweh or Jesus or Adonai in this pledge. But instead, we refer to God, to a unifying force that brings us together, to the very idea that there is something in this world larger than you and me, and that we are accountable to that truth and to that vision. In our society that is focused on the individual and not the community, we have lost something incredibly important, and we have to get it back. These thoughts don't come out of the blue for me, out of my own mind. They come from a lifetime of struggle with and against my own teachers. I want you to begin to take me up on the opportunity to study and to challenge and to wrestle together. And I am so very grateful for my teachers who have helped my faith along. Eugene Borowitz, whom I mentioned earlier, who passed away this year. I read his words before entering cantorial school and studied with him throughout my cantorial and rabbinic education. He taught the intellectual theology of a living God, something that had been missing up until his time. I learned from Nathan Lamb, Cantor Lamb of Stephen Wise Temple, wrestle with the words before you are standing on the bima and wrestle with the words after you are standing on the bima. But when you are standing on the bima praying, you must be a chassid. You must believe. I learned from Mordecai Finley that rational discourse can lead toward God as easily as it can lead away. I learned from Rabbi Joshua Aronson, who has a radically different theology from mine, and has helped me to continually formulate what I believe. I learned from Larry Hoffman and Larry Kushner, who are the masters of metaphor. And I learned from Jonathan Slater, who led me deep into Hasidic thought in a way I'd never had access to before. And so, with inspiration from another rabbi, Jonathan Sachs, I tell you this: I believe. I do not believe that it will be all okay. We all know that's not true. This has been a year that, for me, has tested the very fabric of my own faith in God, in humanity, and in meaning itself. But I believe that God is close in the poetry of the Psalms, in the debates of the Talmud, in the joy of the festivals. God is here in the call from the shofar that awakens that still small voice buried in our souls. God is there in the land and people of Israel, in the land and people of America, founded on the promise of ideals that we hold sacred. I believe that there is sacred meaning in the universe and that it comes from somewhere, and that we are all, each a part of this sacred meaning. Connection to God doesn't make it easier. It doesn't make the circumstances of life change. but it does make it better. It isn't karma. It isn't that simple, much as we would like it to be. The good people in this world have terrible things that happen to them, and the bad sometimes get off scot-free. But what it means is this: if there is a God, then you and I are not it. There is a design and a purpose to you. And you and I, we are accountable to living the best versions of ourselves possible. And on the other hand, if we are not God, and there actually is a God, then it's okay not to be perfect. We can forgive ourselves. We can try again and strive again to do better. We can hit the reset button right now today. We can let go of responsibility that we should have known better, to control the circumstances around us. Like Malkeinu, our king, our sovereign, God is asking a lot of us. But like Avinu, our parent, God is present when we fail, to pick us up, to be there for us, to teach us that we are loved and that we matter. This is the world I want for all of us. The world that Judaism sets forth for us, that the rabbis asserted, that the Psalms teach. It is a world in which we are both responsible for our own actions and capable of being the best selves, the best community, and the best world possible. We are meant for this struggle, and this struggle is meant for us. We cannot give up and we cannot despair. We were created as beings with the potential to be holy in our actions and deeds, with the opportunity, despite all odds, to be courageous rather than fearful, disciplined rather than lazy, joyful rather than suffering, compassionate and just when those measures are required. We can live lives of integrity, honest with ourselves and those around us, even when it is easier, and in some cases in our temporary best interest, to cover stuff up. We were created with a chance to see how beautiful and meaningful it really all is, to help one another rise to the best within us. I believe that when we look up toward the heavens, Esa Einai El Heharim, our help will come. We will be bound together in this sacred task. We will find again and again that life is gorgeous and that we are capable of finding meaning within it. We can come down from our respective trees and leave behind those false piles of meaning and lead courageous lives full of integrity and purpose. Our world can once again feel and be blessed. As the words go in the oldest blessing we know from the Torah, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, may God bless us and keep us. May God shine God's light upon us and through us. May God turn us toward us with shalom. Grant us the peace and wholeness that comes through the struggle and through knowing that God is there.